What's going on there, YouTube? And welcome to Fresh Comic Stories. Guys, this is the channel where we basically sit down and cover different kinds of comic book stories. Now, guys, today we are going to pick back up once again with Marvel Comics, and we are going to continue our coverage over the Uncanny X-Men. Now, guys, the next few stories is us basically kind of doing the Dark Phoenix saga, but also being introduced to a bunch of new characters in the X-Men mythos. And so, guys, in this storyline right here, the Hellfire Club do begin their first battle with the X-Men. The question is, though, who will win, the Hellfire Club or the X-Men? Well, guys, today's video will answer that question for us. And so please hit that like button down below and also subscribe for more comic book videos in the near future. But let's dive into Uncanny X-Men, the Dark Phoenix saga, the prelude. So the storyline does pick up where our last video left off at, with the X-Men leaving Myrrh Island to go back home to the X-Mansion. Now, a couple things happen when the X-Men heading back home. Banshee leaves the X-Men to stay behind with Mariah McTaggart, which makes sense because he does love her, but also the fact his powers are currently not working correctly. And so with him staying behind, it kind of does make sense. Now, while the X-Men are flying back home, that is when you have Jason Wyngarde once again trying to play mind games on Jean Grey, hoping to turn her evil and bring her in as his Black Queen. He does this by sending her mind back in time and having her see a past life of her being married to an ancestor of Jason Wyngarde. Now, it does not last long because Cyclops is able to bring her back to the present day. Now, when the X-Men arrive back home, we come to find out that Professor Xavier is now back on Earth. Now remember, Charles Xavier left Earth with his alien girlfriend Liliandra because he thought the X-Men were dead. But while he was out there, he found a file about the Phoenix and got worried for Jean Grey. And so he came back. But seeing that his X-Men are not dead, he wants to get back to teaching. Now, over the next couple days, we see some issues between Cyclops and Professor Xavier start to show, because Charles Xavier believes that the X-Men need to improve. And that's with Cyclops leading the X-Men, the team is not performing well. Cyclops tries to argue his point, but that is when Cerebro goes off to announce that there are 2 new mutants in the world. Now, as the X-Men are finding out that there are 2 new mutants, we come to find out that the X-Men are being watched by a group called the Hellfire Club. And their goal is to follow the X-Men to the 2 new mutants and capture the X-Men. But we also get the first introduction of Emma Frost, but as a bad guy, not a good guy just yet. Now, we do follow the X-Men on their adventure to find these 2 new mutants. They break up into 2 teams as a way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And so Storm, Wolverine, Colossus, and Charles Xavier go to Chicago because the mutant in Chicago is Kitty Pryde, and this is her first appearance in the X-Men comics. At this point, she is 13 years old, and her powers have not manifest just yet. But when she gets home from school, her parents are meeting up with both Emma Frost and Charles Xavier as possible schools for Kitty Pryde to go to. Now, Emma Frost is really here to trick her to join a school where she will sooner or later help out the Hellfire Club. But for Charles Xavier, he is here to actually have her join the X-Men to really learn how to control her powers. Now, while her parents are meeting with the 2 different people, her powers come to manifest where she's able to phase through solid objects. But after a few scenes of that happening, you have Charles Xavier send the X-Men away with Kitty Pryde to the mall so he can talk to her parents. Now, to wrap up the first chapter of this story, you have Colossus, Kitty Pryde, Wolverine, and Storm go to the mall as a way to see how she feels about the X-Men and also about her being a mutant. The problem is though, when Storm and Kitty Pryde are bonding with one another, you have the Hellfire Club send in a few of their men with armor on to attack the X-Men and to bring them in. Now the X-Men are highly trained, and so with them fighting against these men in robot armor, they were able to take care of them very quickly. But that is when Emma Frost appears and uses her psychic powers to knock out the X-Men, and the three of them are captured. And while Emma Frost and the rest of her men were able to put the X-Men on their strange looking vehicle, Kitty Pryde was able to sneak inside the vehicle by learning how to use her new powers. Now she is hoping she can use her powers to save the X-Men from the Hellfire Club. Now, the second chapter jumps over to Jean Grey, Kurt Wagner, and Scott Summers arriving to the location of the other mutant that Cerebro picked up. Now, when the X-Men arrive to the scene, they have no idea that in Chicago, their fellow teammates have been captured. But you have the three characters arrive to this rundown building that a concert is being held at. And so they walk inside hoping to find her quickly and get out of there, because the people who are attending the concert look like some rough people. Now Nightcrawler stays outside because, well, his appearance, but you have Jean Grey and Cyclops walk inside hoping to find the new mutant very quickly. Now we jump back over to Emma Frost, her men and the X-Men she captured. The reason why we jump back over to them is because we are learning who is the leader of the Hellfire Club. We get introduced to Sebastian Shaw, but also we learn that the Hellfire Club is a gentleman club for the high class. But inside the club, there is an inner circle who basically do evil deeds. Now remember, Kitty Pryde is hiding somewhere hoping to free the X-Men from the Hellfire Club. But while she goes to try to break Storm out of the cage, that is when you have Storm hand Kitty Pryde a phone number to alert the other X-Men in New York. But as soon as Storm hands over the piece of paper to Kitty Pryde, that is when you have the Hellfire Club seek Kitty and try to capture her. Lucky for her, with her knowing how to use her new powers, she was able to escape from the Hellfire Club and reach a phone to hopefully call the other X-Men team. But then we jump back to Jean Grey, Kurt Wagner, and Scott Summers. This is where we see Jason Wingard once again try to use his powers on Jean Grey, hoping to bring her to be his Black Queen. And now come to find out that he is working alongside with the Hellfire Club. And he is trying to get her to join their ranks, but as the Black Queen. Now with her using his powers this time, he makes things worse for Jean Grey and Scott. The reason why is because you have Jason Wingard in the present day kissing Jean, and of course Scott catches them. And so when Jean comes back to and sees what is happening and tries to explain to Scott, but that is when you have the concert begin and we get introduced to the other mutant the X-Men were looking for, which is of course Dazzler. Now as soon as the concert starts, outside where Nightcrawler is at, he hears the phone from the car ring and answers the phone. That is when he gets word from Kitty Pryde that their fellow X-Men members have been captured. Before Nightcrawler is able to ask her more questions on the situation, that is when you have the Hellfire Club start to attack Nightcrawler, and inside the building also attack Jean Grey and Cyclops. Now, You do have Dazzler join the battle because she realized with her powers she can actually help out. Now with Dazzler, her powers are based around light. What I mean is that her ability to convert sound vibrations into light and energy beams. That is really it. But you have her help the X-Men out fighting against these men who work for the Hellfire Club, but wearing armor like the ones who attacked the X-Men team in Chicago. But you have the X-Men take care of these guys very easily actually. But unlike the other X-Men team, they do not have to run into Emma Frost. And so they are able to get away from the Hellfire Club and take Dazzler with them, hoping they can be able to save their fellow X-Men teammates. Now with the third chapter of this story, you have the story shift back over to Kitty Pryde, who is right now being chased down by some members of the Hellfire Club. Now with her being chased down, you have at the very last second the Phoenix arrive to save her from these Hellfire Club members. Now this is where Chris Claremont kind of build up the fear towards the Phoenix with the other X-Men members. For example, you have Cyclops, Dazzler, and Nightcrawler look at Phoenix as someone who could end up possibly being the death to them, because she was able to tear up the car the Hellfire was using with just a wave of her hand. But also, she starts to say things that seem kind of dark. And so with that happening, it's Chris Claremont saying maybe, just maybe, Jason Wyngarde powers are working. But you then have Kitty Pryde tell the X-Men team where the other X-Men team is being held at. And with that piece of information, you have Cyclops cook up a game plan to go after the Hellfire Club. And so with the second half of the story, you have Cyclops and his team sneak into the base of the Hellfire Club and try their best to break out the rest of the X-Men. Now, with the second half of the chapter, it is just used to show us the powers of the X-Men fighting against the Hellfire Club. But the biggest moment actually comes when Jean Grey fights against Emma Frost. Because now you're about to have a psychic fight against each other. Now, if Jean Grey did not have her powers boosted by the Phoenix, then it would be an even battle at this point in Marvel Comics. But with her right now having that extra power boost from the Phoenix, she is not really being challenged by Emma Frost. It is more of her kind of toying with Emma Frost. But once again, you have Chris Claremont use this chapter again to build up the fear towards the Phoenix. Because while the two are battling against each other, Storm is watching the battle and seeing that Phoenix is playing with Emma Frost and saying some horrible things. But with the battle going a tad bit crazy, the building blows up. Now the X-Men do survive, but it does seem like Emma Frost had died in the explosion. Now the final few pages of this story, you have the X-Men bring Kitty Pryde back home to her parents, but also the fact it does answer the big question: will Dazzler and Kitty Pryde join the X-Men and build up their roster? Now, Dazzler leaves saying she is not ready to be a superhero. But with Kitty Pryde, the story ends with the X-Men going inside her home to once again talk to her parents about the whole situation of her being a mutant. But guys, this is the end of today's video. And so guys, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe for more comic book videos in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video in the near future. But guys, this is the end of today's video, and so I'll see you on the next comic book video. Later guys, have a great day.